I just thought it would be quite helpful as part of the introduction just to show a few key facts about China. So I put together a few things, and sometimes these things are quite, the figures are quite amazing really. Population of 1.35 billion, that's a considerable amount larger than the UK, as you appreciate. And in terms of the largest cities, Shanghai, 23 million, that's what, 2.5 times the population of London. Beijing's pretty well approaching that as well. Guangzhou, I put in there in a bracket, not a municipality. So of the largest cities, the others have more governing, more administration rights than Guangzhou. 12.8 and Tianjin 12.8, about the same size. Chongqing, strangely, you might think, well, have you heard of Chongqing? I'm sure most of you have, but 29 million people. That's really just the administrative area. It's one of those fairly recently given the status of municipality, but actually it's certainly a burgeoning place with a number of small cities within that urban area. And in those municipalities, the actual they have the highest government ranking, which is actually a mayor. You have mayor of Shanghai, mayor of Beijing, and so on, which is quite an important position in those places. As we know from our own experience, China's population is urbanising rapidly from the rural areas to the urban cities. I looked up and found an estimate that says 250 million people will migrate to cities over the next 10 years. And that's a number of people, it certainly is. If you look at the national plan, there's been one every 4 years since 1953. The latest one, we're now just starting the 12th national plan, 2011-2015. And as part of that, they reckon the urbanisation rate will be about 51%. Okay, it's lower than in Europe, but actually, you know, it's made a lot of progress, the movement from rural to urban areas, and cities are, the proportion of people in cities is actually increasing quite rapidly now. As part of that current 4-year plan, there's some quite interesting things they're seeking to achieve. High-speed railways. I mean, London's got, what, just a few kilometres from from Dover down through to London. China's looking at 45,000 kilometres. Now, that's a staggering statistic, as by any means. Highway works, 83,000 kilometres. 36 million new affordable apartments for low-income people. That's an interesting statistic. I'm not quite sure how it's going to be achieved, but I'm sure some of my speakers might be talking about that. And another one I came across was within the next 2 decades, 300 new cities will be required. I mean, there have been, you may have seen some in the press, 1 or 2 eco-cities and that, but 1 or 2 of my colleagues, I think, and the speakers today may be talking about those, but that's quite interesting. In terms of the distribution of population, I think it's quite useful to see. The darker red is the more intense areas, clearly, and so although China is a very, very big country, the way in which that population is distributed is really in that eastern and southern half of the country. And that's where the real pressures are in terms of the big cities and the issues. In terms of high-speed railways, this is a quick plan showing the network as it's evolving. It's certainly linking all the big cities from the north down through to the south. Look at that in terms of time. I think that's quite a critical thing, because I know from my experience, I've just back from China from my 12th visit, and here it says, if you look at the timeline, Beijing to Shanghai, about 4 or 5 hours, something like that. Certainly I did the route from Shanghai to Beijing in 5 hours. The high-speed train, just once it gets up to 300 kph, it just stays there, and you've got perhaps 3 or 4 stops en route. It's a very, very nice journey. I found it better than travelling by plane, all the to's and froms going back and forwards from stations. And I think a lot of Chinese urban dwellers now, business people, are really sort of getting onto that sort of bandwagon, using the high-speed trains to and from their business journeys, using their laptops as they go to and fro between cities. And this is quite something which is quite interesting, you know, in terms of the urbanising population and the way in which people plug into the high-speed railways and then transfer into the underground as well. And I'll talk about the undergrounds again in a moment. Just a quick diagram to show how that actually diagrammatically links between the various cities, between the north and the south, Shenzhen being the very south of the country. Well, that's what they look like. Now, I think, well, judging by the ones I've been on, there was usually 16 carriages and there's 100 people per carriage. So you're talking about 1,600 people being offloaded at any one time on a train. And they only take a couple of minutes to actually load up because of the efficiency in which people are actually brought together above the railway platforms and then brought down just fractionally before the train arrives. And the punctuality is amazing. They're always within a few seconds of the actual time. Most of these high-speed railways are actually on stilts, concrete stilts between the cities, and so the actual footprint on the agricultural land, for example, where it passes between the cities, is fairly small. So you can still grow your crops around that. And of course, being the government owns the land at any rate, it doesn't have to, in terms of the purchasing, it doesn't apply in that sense. Some of the station architecture, it's a bit actually like going into an airport lounge. I mean, this one is Beijing South Station, which I arrived at recently. Very similar one, this is the largest one of all, which is the Shanghai Hongkou, which is near the airport in Shanghai. Again, they're very modern buildings, very clean and very efficient in terms of the way they operate. So, looking at some of the issues on urbanism in China, I think the way things are emerging is they're looking for compact cities, high density, tall buildings, and a lot of public transport investment. Just pluck out Shanghai, for example, in terms of tall buildings. We've got the Shanghai Tower, 632 metres, which will be finished next year. Now, that is more than twice the height of the Shard, which is 308 metres, if I remember rightly. The Shanghai World Financial Centre and Jingmao Tower already exist. They're part of the Jingmao Tower is the one on the middle there, and the Pearl Tower, which is on the left-hand side, is an earlier tall, but it's actually not as tall as the Jingmao Tower. And there we are, the Shanghai Tower development, which should be finished by next year. I mean, you think the Shard is less than half that height. It's quite a number of people that those buildings that come out of those buildings at rush hour time does have quite severe implications on some of the transport systems, and you do need a transport system to cope with that. And I'm just talking about that. I mean, Beijing and Tianjin were the first cities in China to have underground systems. Shanghai only had its first underground line in 1995. I was there in 2007. I think it was about two or three then at that stage. And they were very congested when you got to the People's Square, which is the intersection of the two main ones. But since then, things have gone on amazingly, and we've now got 11 underground lines serving most of the city, and it's now become the world's largest or longest system of railway. So I think those are a few of the facts to start off with.